Hi, this is Astrid and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how to integrate Studio One with the new Luna as your console. Now, for you Studio One users, I'm pleasantly surprised to find this out on my own. I haven't really spent any time with Studio One. This was my very first venture into using it and playing around with it. But this is also, to my surprise, a product where the developers have spent some time trying to understand latency. And they actually tackled it very well by creating a very tight integrated audio control mechanism. So they have low latency monitoring for instruments, and they have another feature called use native low latency monitoring instead of hardware monitoring. So in essence, what it does is it allows you to have zero latency when you're actually playing live instruments into the DAW and you're monitoring those instruments. So that was a pleasant surprise. So it looks like what I'm finding in doing this is that most of the modern DAWs that have come out in the past few years, they've been able to utilize all of the resources of most of the modern computers, and they've come up with better ways to tackle latency. Now, latency is dependent upon a lot of variables, and I do understand the complexity of it, but guys, you guys have been doing this for what, almost 2 decades now? Since the 80s. It's been a while. So you've had more than enough time to try to figure out how to tackle it as a whole. But I'm pleasantly surprised by the new DAW makers and their attempts at really tackling it and understanding it. So when you play something in Studio One, there's really no real need for Luna, other than if you're wanting to utilize the new tape saturation plugins, which again, you can get the Studer as a regular plugin, but the new Neve summing bus is an exclusive thing for Luna, and it is amazing. I have been spending a lot more time playing around with it, and hear that UAD is working on additional types of plugins that work this way as well. So I'm looking forward to being able to utilize those. But this thing adds just a really interesting top kind of shimmer on top of everything. It has a flip switch for low end and high end, so you can alter that top end if you're wanting to alter that, or bottom end if you're wanting to enhance that. Without it, things sound more flat, less dynamic. With it, it adds just something. It's really hard to describe what it is. It's very harmonic in whatever it's doing from a technical perspective. It took me a while to really understand that. I of course, am a native Ableton user, and if you haven't been watching my channel, I created a video on how to create a link so that you can utilize the real-time inside of Ableton. But I've been doing a lot of mixing lately, and I'm utilizing Luna, the tape saturation along with the Neve summing, and doing a lot of bounce outs and taking those bounce outs to other places like my car, headphones, and just listening to them and seeing the differences. It's different. And I've also had other people listen to it as well, so that I wanted to verify that I wasn't just tripping. But it's awesome. It's awesome. It's an awesome new feature that UAD implemented for Luna. But again, let's talk about how, if you're wanting to take advantage of some of the new console item features that you wouldn't have with your regular UAD console, and if you're trying to use Luna as a console. So in my very first video, I showed you how to go in and set up all the audio tracks and add all your outboard gear, which is what I did for my initial setup. And I'm using a virtual audio channel to route all of the sound out of Studio One into Luna. And again, I'm still using the same channel, which is virtual port 3 and 4. I have some tape saturation on it, and I'm also doing a send out to the main. I found if I just let it output to the main, I wasn't really hearing the Neve summing, which is kind of interesting. So I've been tinkering around with the routing as well, just to make sure that I'm truly understanding how things are working. But with this particular setup, it seems to work the best when you're utilizing it as a source where you're bringing something over from another DAW. So let's go into Studio One and talk about how I set up things in here. Okay, so in Studio One, I go to Preferences, and I am going to look at I want to say it's song mode setup or song setup down here at the bottom of the screen on the lower left here. And I'm going to go to my outputs. So the only thing I did in here is I just changed my outputs to that virtual ports 3 and 4. And wow, this is super Pro Tools looking. I haven't seen this layout like this for outputs in a long time. As soon as I opened this up, and I just had a Pro Tools flashback. Because this is the only kind of view I've ever seen set up that way is in Pro Tools. I really wish some of the other DAW makers would do this, because it sometimes makes it super easy to be able to understand your routing when you're doing special routing. But this is awesome. So I just set up my, again, the channels on left and right here. And there's no inputs. You don't need to bring anything back in, because it's routing everything normally back through 1 and 2, which is your main. So when you bounce out, it'll be there. And I've been testing and testing to validate that. And yes, it works. So the only thing that you have to be concerned about is routing out your main left and right. And that seems to take care of all of the routing. So that's really all that was required. And here I'll just show you that it does work, because then you'll be able to see the signal flow here over in the Luna. So you're getting signal flow here. So everything is working. Again, I've been testing this quite a bit. Testing bounce out tracks just to validate my signal flow, to make sure that these plugins, anything that I do over here, is translating into the mix and not being kind of left out some kind of way. And so far, everything seems to work as I'm expecting it to work. Now, I did tinker around a lot more with Ableton, and I actually contacted Ableton to ask if there was a way to bypass their audio control system. And there is a way to do it, but it is not good. I'm going to do a video on that, and I'm going to show you how to do it if you desire to do that. What I found, though, is when you create the return back to the DAW, it creates a lot of excessive jitter and noise into the signal chain, which you don't want. You don't want all that jitter and junk coming back into the signal chain. Also, it starts really amping up the DSP on your UAD device. In my case, I have a dual core or dual card Apollo 8. If you have a dual card Apollo 8, it's going to tax it quite a bit. I also have a satellite, quad satellite. So I guess I'm not really concerned about my DSP usage because I have an extra with that satellite, but it can really amp up your DSP usage when you're trying to run everything real time through Luna. But it is possible. And it's probably also possible with Studio One if you create a return back in. But guys, you don't need it with Studio One because it's already got real time under control. The only time you want to do that is if you're dealing with an app like Ableton that has issues with latency that are unsolvable. Unsolvable until Ableton repairs it, which is probably going to require complete DAW overhaul, which they're probably due for. I don't think they've overhauled Ableton in a really long time. Actually, I don't think they've ever overhauled it. I've seen them add things to it over the years and continually add functionality, but I've never seen a complete overhaul. Anyway, let's see. What else do you need to know about this thing in here? That's really it. I mean, simplicity's sake, if you have a UAD device and you already have access to Luna and the console, and the console, the software console, you can do this. The routing is super simple. Your gains with it is that you add an additional audio sweet spot for yourself by being able to use the Neve summing and the tape control in its more native environment, because it would be driven by DSP and not by your DAW's audio control system. Because if you bring in UAD's plugins into the DAW environment, it still uses the DSP, but in Luna it uses in a more native format way or a native way by using their real-time system. Whereas in your DAW, your un-UAD device, DAW, it brings it in, it uses a DSP, but it doesn't use it as efficiently as it would be using it in Luna. Well, that's all I have for today. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comments section. And if you're enjoying the content, please subscribe and like, and I'll see you on the next one.